The ability to create, distribute, and monetize software is foundational to today's information technology economy. But buying preferences and patterns change. Usage-based pricing and hybrid monetization strategies are emerging as software companies adapt to new market realities. The latest Revenera Monetization Monitor report sheds light on these trends and points the way to profitability in 2025. Hi, I'm Stan Gibson for CIO Marketing Services, and I'll be your host and moderator for this video webcast. Joining me to explore the findings of that report and what they mean to you are two monetization experts. Michael Goff, Principal Product Marketing at Revenera. Welcome, Michael. It's great to have you here for this webcast.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be here.
And Chris Cahill, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Revenera. Welcome, Chris. Glad you could be with us today.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Michael, to kick things off, can you please tell us a bit about Revenera, the company, and the latest Monetization Monitor report?
Sure. So thanks, Dan. And so for those of you not familiar with Revenera, we are a company that has solutions that help technology companies build better products, accelerate time to value, and unlock new revenue opportunities. And software market is $1 trillion market, and actually Revenera monetizes $46 billion of annual revenue for our customers. So a leader in the space and doing a lot there. For those of you, again, new to us, and we really focus on some growth opportunity areas, including SaaS and hybrid transformation, the digital transformation of device companies, so traditional hardware companies that are investing in intelligent device strategies and going from one-time hardware sales to a recurring revenue model with software. But as we'll see later in the session, there's a long tail of on-prem software. So there's a lot to do with that long tail in terms of continuing to support it, to continuing to monetize it, and to make sure that you are getting the value out of your on-prem solutions. Which of course leads us into flexible monetization models and how important it is to make sure that you can support the different ways that your end customers want to buy. So as part of what we do every year, over the last several years, is we do a survey of senior leaders at digital technology companies. And we do 3 reports a year, one on software monetization models and strategies, one on software piracy and compliance, and one on software usage analytics. And each year it points to different things. And we like to sort of pull those out and like we're doing today, give you an outlook into some areas to focus on in 2025 and the year ahead. But the through line of all of those things are really about accelerating time to value and unlocking those new revenue opportunities. So this year, the pieces that we've pulled out that are opportunities for us to focus on and for you to focus on is the rise of usage-based pricing models, growth of hybrid monetization strategies, and identifying and addressing the biggest barriers to revenue growth.
Chris, over to you now. What does the monetization report tell us about evolving pricing model preferences? I'm wondering which are growing fastest and which are perhaps losing momentum.
Yeah, so this question is always interesting. It's one where we've seen a fair bit of movement over the past few years. So 61% of our customers, when asked the question, over the next 12 to 18 months, do you expect the following software monetization models to grow or decline as a percentage of your overall license revenue? 61% expect subscription revenue to continue to increase over the next 18 months. 60% say outcome or value-based revenue will increase, and 59% expect usage-based models to grow. So ultimately, I think it will come as no surprise to see subscription on top. But what's perhaps somewhat surprising is to see that the more flexible approach is really close behind. And if you were to look at these results from a couple of years back, the usage-based approaches were about knocking on 40%. So the fact that they're now right up there, knocking at 60%, it kind of suggests there's been a real appetite to offer more flexibility. And nobody's suggesting that they're going to like overtake subscription in terms of percentage of revenue. but there's clearly strong growth and interest in offering that usage-based approach. And these results tally with analyst research.
Really interesting stuff, Chris. But one thing that is interesting is when you look at the perpetual line, 52%. So perpetual, a fairly traditional model, but it's not going out of favor. And you would expect with the rise of subscription that the decline in perpetual might have increased more than 11%, but it hasn't. So again, I think that really speaks to the ability for technology companies to support these multiple monetization models, because ultimately it all comes down to offering your products the way your customers want to buy them.
For the past decade or so, there's always been that talk of perpetual licensing being old school and everyone wants to move to subscription models, which is definitely what we're seeing. But as you say, there's still that increased importance or recognition of like the potential to grow your on-prem perpetual licensing as well. And our results do tally with IDC research. So, at Revenera, we survey over 400 technology companies, which is a fairly substantial data set. But IDC can take this to a whole other level, surveying both on the producer side, technology companies, and also on the customer side. So this particular chart we're looking at, pricing model preferences for SaaS. So IDC surveyed 2,800 SaaS buyers, and while subscriptions are still out on top as the preferred buying model, I guess because you've got that predictability in what you're subscribing to. But interestingly, if you were to combine the prepaid and postpaid consumption approaches, they would actually leapfrog subscription. So the consumption models together take 42% of the votes ahead of 38% on the subscription side. So again, we're not saying that consumption is going to overtake subscription, but it does suggest that buyers are craving more flexibility. So having the ability to layer usage-based options on top of subscriptions can ultimately help you win more business and deliver more value to the customers.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Chris. And actually, if folks are interested in more information on this, obviously this slide talks about SaaS buyers. This slide actually comes from a webinar we did recently with Mark Thomason, an IDC analyst. You see it referenced here: software monetization trends and usage-based approaches to monetizing AI. So two quick plugs. One, if you want to see sort of the SaaS producer side of things, Mark goes through a bunch of stats there. But also, monetizing AI is a huge topic these days. A lot of our customers, a lot of prospects looking at how do I monetize AI? Very high costs associated with AI. It's really important to get that monetization right. And one of the things, spoilers, is a usage-based approach to doing that.
Well, let me ask about the so-called metered token model. What are the advantages of the metered token approach?
Yeah, so metered tokens, I think there's lots of different terminology that technology producers will reference and what will resonate with them. Some prefer prepaid credits or flexible credits. Ultimately, with metered tokens, it's that usage-based approach. So giving your customers the ability to purchase like on-demand access to products that really kind of complement their subscription. So while they may subscribe to that a particular set of use rights, capacity, licenses, however you want to describe it, giving the flexibility to dial up or dial down their access as and when needed. That's kind of what we mean by metered tokens. I like to think of it as like a vending machine. So ultimately, you've got your portfolio of products, and your customers, while they may have subscribed to a particular product, particular application, they've got the ability to access other products within your portfolio on a pay-per-use basis.
Chris, I'll extend your analogy a little bit. I like to think of your vending machine as being in the cafeteria that you have access to all day. And sometimes you go in for lunch, but sometimes you want that ice cream sandwich at the end of your meal or an energy drink. And it's nice to be able to put your tokens in and get that extra stuff on top of what you're already entitled to.
Yeah. So, like, to put this into real terms, perhaps you have a portfolio of products that are for designers. So your design team, they might have a photo editing application, and they need to use that on a daily basis. Occasionally, they may also need to access the video editing application. But rather than subscribing to each of these, which may not get used all of the time, giving them this metered token or prepaid credit, flexible credit, you're able to allow that access on demand, essentially. So as and when they need that product. So again, you've still got your base subscription level, but you've also got that ability to pick and choose the products and applications at the time when you most need it. I think particularly relevant for if you have a particular project or seasonal activity where you need increased access. This is where we see like the real benefit of this mixed approach coming in.
Yeah, and again, Chris, we are always talking about aligning price with value, making sure that you're delivering something that customers value, you're pricing it accordingly, they're consuming it in the way with the models that they want to use most. But again, there may be tools that they only need on a seasonal basis, for demand, or there might be tools that they only need at certain times of the year. For example, if you are designing new products, you might use that core application for design and prototyping year round, but testing or doing simulations, you may only need once a year or once a quarter. The interesting thing is, through this model of usage-based, both you and your customer will get insights into what that usage looks like. So now you're getting a feedback loop. Now you're getting insight into, what, customer software vendor that is offering this product, this particular application is really important to this type of customer, or seasonally you can see peaks and trends and maybe offer that more often, but also price it appropriately. So if you see a product, for example, that gets a little bit lower use, but you want to encourage that use, maybe you only charge 2 tokens per access for that. And if you see something a little bit more valuable, you say, you know what, there's a willingness to pay that we can now get closer to aligning price and value with that. So it's a really great opportunity to make sure that your customers have access to the tools that they need, and also get to try new things, and then perhaps expand their subscription in the next period.
Yeah, I think that's a really important use case, the ability to try new products within the portfolio, and then you're exposing those upsell and cross-sell opportunities, giving people frictionless access to your whole portfolio. It just makes that conversation much easier. Your customers will be able to really see that the real world benefits of trying those applications, which may traditionally come with long sales cycles. But yeah, having that ability to easily access your full portfolio, it's a win-win for both you and your customers.
Yeah, and we'll touch upon this in the next topic, but the ability during peak need to overuse, right, what you're subscribing to. Now you're being, as the vendor, you are being compensated for that use. You don't have to worry so much about the traditional overuse thing, where now you have to do a little bit of mathematics at the end of a period and make sure that the company trues up. But we'll get to that in a second.
So for the first key takeaway, based on the Monetization Monitor data, ultimately is to look at that usage-based approach and consider how it can complement your subscription model to grow additional revenue.
Shifting gears just a little bit and moving on to another topic, I'm wondering what companies can do to minimize revenue loss, which is chronically a problem.
Yeah, that's a great question, Stan. And we're going to focus this discussion on 3 main causes of revenue leakage: piracy, overuse, and misuse. Of course, there are many other sources of revenue leakage, churn being among them and a top one. But what we really want to dial in on is piracy, which is the use of software that's been configured or tampered with to remove or bypass license enforcement. Overuse, which is the use of software exceeding the limits of the license of the subscription that we were sort of just referring to. And then misuse, which is the intentional configuration of the software to enable use beyond the limits of the license. And interestingly, when we look at this chart here, we see that in the last year, it's roughly even. About a third of companies are reporting that, the issues causing revenue leakage, piracy, overuse, and misuse are all about a third, and it's a major problem.
Just going to say, Mike, but before you move on, I find this really fascinating how, looking at the data from 2021 up to today, you see that kind of progressive step up in people reporting these issues as being major concerns. So why do you think that is? Do you think it's there is more overuse, misuse going on these days, or do you think it's also to do with the ability to kind of track that behavior and there's a greater awareness of these license infringements?
That is a great question, and I think there are a couple of ways to approach it. One is it's a little bit chicken and egg, right? Because we're looking at these numbers, we know that overuse and misuse are higher. Piracy, traditionally most vendors have a pretty good handle on, but I think you're right. I think with the growth of analytics and the ability to track overuse and misuse, it's a recognition issue, right? That it's become more of a problem. But also, I think in more challenging economic times, software producers are looking at areas where they can expand their revenue. And I think identifying and addressing overuse and misuse have been an area of greater focus over the last couple of years, which sort of gets us into the question of, so how do you know? What sources do you use to learn that you're losing revenue to software piracy, overuse, or misuse? And traditionally, we see a lot of sort of anecdotal, sort of word of mouth. So you hear from your sales or support team, hey, you know what? We think this customer is probably pirating software or overusing. Or you might get somebody from support saying, hey, somebody called in looking for support on a product that they don't own. They may not be aware that it's a pirated copy because sometimes piracy is unintentional. But there is this anecdotal stream of, hey, you may have an issue. And of course, many software providers have audit programs that clauses in their licenses that say, we have the right to go in and look. It's very resource intensive. It's not very scalable, and it's a delicate balance that you need to strike with existing customers of doing an audit. And then, of course, there are whistleblowers. These are disgruntled employees or former employees who have an axe to grind. So sometimes you got to question how reliable that testimony is. But you're being made aware of piracy, overuse, and misuse. 35%, though, are now reporting that they're learning about piracy, overuse, and misuse from telemetry or phone home data, which is a good thing to see, right? This is a scalable process. It is automated process, and it lets you know when those things are occurring in your user base. And interestingly, in the case of piracy, people who are not in your CRM system because they're not customers yet. They're customers in the sense that they are using your software and they love your software. They just haven't paid for you. So again, aligning price with value, aligning price with compensation. More troubling is this 5% that just doesn't know, and that's just a problem. But when we look at phone home and telemetry, one of the solutions that's available that Revenera offers is a solution called compliance intelligence. And what that enables software vendors to do is to detect and identify those organizations with unlicensed software use. And if you think about it, these are some really good leads, right? So you have a dashboard for tracking infringements and building license compliance cases. You know that they like your software because they're using it. So it's sort of a weird analogy, flip side to churn. Like you see a lot of good use of this, and then you can go after those particular organizations that are heavy users that should be paying more for your software. So it's either a piracy scenario where it's somebody who should be a customer and just isn't yet, and they may not even know, as we touched on before, or in the case of an existing customer, you can compare the information you're getting from compliance intelligence to your entitlement database, see what they're entitled to, see what their actual usage is, and see that exact amount of overage. So now you're able to act on that data. It's very actionable intelligence that allows you to convert those opportunities into revenue.
I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Revenera compliance intelligence team, because I genuinely think they've got the coolest job in the whole company, because they are there using this telemetry data, a bit like the FBI, tracking down the baddies and helping them to convert them into paying customers.
It's funny that you say the baddies, Chris, because as I mentioned, sometimes the folks using software have no idea that it's been pirated or no idea that they're overusing or misusing. So there is a lot of unintentional piracy, overuse, and misuse. And as I said, they are huge fans of your software. They are very good customers. They just may not have paid you in full or the full amount of what you're owed. And I think that's a mind shift that a lot of folks need to make. There had been this myth before that, nobody's going to pay for pirated software. It's just happening in certain regions or it's students. In fact, using a compliance intelligence approach over the years, our customers have generated $4.2 billion of new license revenue from their compliance programs using that. So there's that. And then just one more thing to add on to about compliance intelligence, the application, the product, is there are going to be certain cases where you may have like a low dollar, high volume application. So maybe $100 per seat. It doesn't really make sense for you to go into Salesforce and reach out individually to all those folks. What compliance intelligence also offers is the ability to have a piracy response feature that controls application access and behavior. So you can put out a pop-up message within the application, alerting the user that it's an unlicensed application or the application's been tampered with, give them a certain number of days to call in to more and more and to pay. And if they don't do that over time, you can escalate that response to limiting certain functionality to all the way to turning that application off. So it's a very good way to make sure that you are both driving people to convert and to pay, but also to make sure that you're leveling the playing field for your existing customers who are using your tools for their own competitive advantage. So you're doing your due diligence to make sure, again, that the playing field is level. The other interesting thing is when we aggregate some of this data from our customers, we're able to see the top 20 software license misuse and piracy hotspots. There is no surprise that the top 5 are sort of the usual suspects. They've been hanging out in the top 5 for quite some time. China, Russia, India, Brazil, the BRIC countries, a lot of piracy happens there. A lot of piracy happens in the United States too. And that's actually good news because that's a region where you can convert those opportunities to revenue. And when you look at some of the numbers, so it's been a while since the BSA has put out their global software survey, but they do a calculation of the commercial value of unlicensed software. And when you look at the regions on this list that are areas that have strong IP enforcement rights, there's an $18.7 billion new license revenue opportunity for software suppliers in those regions. And that's actually a jump of about 2.5 billion from the year before. So it's really important to know as a software vendor where it's happening and to take advantage of that in many ways. And in fact, we are drinking our own champagne. So some of you may be familiar with Install Shield. It is an application that we have been selling for a while. It helps on-premise software vendors package their software and produce installers that allow end customers to install the software on their machines. It's a very mature market. They have over 50,000 active customers, but there's always been this challenge. We know that there are issues with overuse, and we know that there's a piracy issue. So what we did was we deployed compliance intelligence into Install Shield, and now the team is able to qualify and act on that data to convert it, both the piracy and the overuse. And again, it's all in Salesforce dashboards. It makes it very easy to go in and look and see what the opportunities are. And again, delineate between existing customers where there might be overuse. And by the way, sometimes there's piracy in existing customers. It just happens. Crack software does leak into well-intentioned customers. And then in the case of existing customers, identify those overuse opportunities. And the good news is, as we see on this chart over the years, the amount of licensed use has increased over time. The amount of piracy has declined. But more importantly, the Install Shield team has added 10% of their top line revenue by following this approach. So that brings us to our second takeaway. It's really important to monitor compliance to grow revenue by reducing piracy, overuse, and misuse. A lot of folks ignore it, but I think they do that at their peril. You focus on churn, you should also focus on piracy, overuse, and misuse.
Yeah, I think it really goes to show like the value of the Install Shield program, like how they've been able to dramatically improve their overall licensed usage compared to where it was at the beginning of 2023 with the pirated usage was actually outranking the licensed usage. It's been quite a dramatic improvement there.
Michael and Chris, looking into the future now, I'm wondering, does the report say, does the report shed any light on deployment model trends for the next couple of years? Chris, I'm wondering if you could answer that question for us.
Yeah, so this is always another interesting area. So over the next 12 to 18 months, do you expect the following software deployment models to grow or decline as a percentage of your overall revenue? Again, no surprise really to see SaaS topping the list, 61%. Somewhat surprising, private cloud is neck and neck with SaaS for expected growth. Michael and I were discussing the reasons for that. I kind of feel that with this focus on profitability, the fact that cloud costs are spiraling, a lot of organizations seem to be moving towards building their own cloud environments rather than utilizing Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, because the getting greater control over costs has become more of a priority. So that's why there seems to be that increased willingness or need to explore private cloud options. But for me, one of the most surprising areas of growth is that on-premises software at 56%. Because if we drill down into this data a little more and we look back over the past 4 years, you'll see that back in 2022, only 25% of organizations expected their on-prem revenue to grow. That's dramatically shot up to now 56% expect their on-prem revenue to grow. And again, this kind of ties back to the hybrid monetization approach that we were discussing earlier. It just really highlights that need to be able to manage your hybrid strategies.
Yeah, and interestingly, again, to your point about, selling the way customers want to buy, there are certain end customers that prefer an on-prem solution because they're in an air gap scenario, or because they have security concerns, or the computing requirements for certain applications is a lot higher. So we definitely don't see on-prem going away, and that long tail certainly exists, which again is all the more reason to focus on that recovery of revenue from a compliance intelligence perspective, because if you have on-prem software, you want to make sure you're monetizing that as long as it's out there and as long as it's working, and then use that to fund your SaaS efforts as well. So you have those hybrid scenarios of both on-prem and SaaS.
I think there's been a shift in mentality from being cloud first to cloud smart, i.e., not necessarily having to push everything to the cloud, but just being very cognizant of your abilities and how your customer preferences are. So at Revenera, we talk about managing complexity at scale. So if you're a relatively young company or small company, perhaps you only have one deployment model, one monetization model. As you grow, whether that's like organically through adding to your product lines, your different deployment options, different monetization options, or whether you grow via mergers and acquisitions, if that's part of your growth strategy. Ultimately, the more whether you're adding subscription or you're supporting usage-based options, supporting SaaS, supporting on-prem software, the more you grow, the more complex everything becomes. So this really brings home the point to the benefits of centralizing your strategies.
It's interesting, Chris. When we talk about, when you're young, you might just have one deployment model, one monetization model, and your definition of young could be different. You could be a pretty mature company, but have a young SaaS, team that's working to put that out. And the danger is working in silos. And I think that's what you're getting at too, is like when everything is in silos and you don't have that big visibility into all your applications across all deployment models, and have that ability to see what customer adoption looks like, customer engagement looks like, that becomes a challenge. And I think sometimes even mature companies forget, when they're introducing something new, to avoid some of those mistakes of, well, this is just SaaS. It's pretty straightforward. But to your point, that typically will exist alongside an on-prem solution, alongside an embedded solution, and perhaps with different ways of monetizing it. So really great points.
Yeah, and you might have certain customers who are using SaaS applications as well as your on-prem applications. You want to be able to create a unified customer experience for them, and also, give your internal teams visibility into all of that customer data, to ensure that they've got this centralized approach. And we talk about entitlement management being at the center of CRM systems and billing. Do you want to expand on that, Michael? Like how you can centralize your
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the quote to cash process, from the time the order comes in until it gets fulfilled, until it feeds back into your billing system, entitlement management, as you said, does sit at the center of that. And if you are offering different applications through different deployment models with different monetization models, it can be, really challenging to make sure that you do have that insight. We call it a single pane of glass, or a 360-degree view and insights into customer engagement and adoption. And it's not just the churn issues, right? It's the cross-sell opportunities. Like if everything is siloed, you're really missing out on your ability as a vendor to make sure that you are, again, as a software producer, you want to make sure you're providing value to your end customers, and that you have the insights available through analytics to understand this is a good product to offer to this customer. And again, they may have been using some token-based, usage-based models that feeds into that. But unless you have all of that sort of within one framework, within that one single pane of glass, you're missing out on opportunities to grow recurring revenue.
Yeah, and on that note, when we look at the analytics and the data that you can gain those insights from, key point is tracking a customer's renewal position. So having the ability to measure like entitlements which are expiring, perhaps creating automated alerts so that all of your customer success teams, renewals teams, sales teams are aware when a renewal is coming up. That can only help with growing revenue. And on a similar note, fulfillment. So making sure, selling software is just one part of the journey, right? Once you've sold it, you need to actually make sure that your customers are using the products and then the capacity that they paid for. So being able to track fulfillment and that utilization rate, again, that helps to ensure customer success. Make sure that there isn't going to be that churn risk. So giving your teams the ability to access this data so that they can remain fully cognizant of any potential issues and prevent them from any leakage happening.
Michael and Chris, we're reaching the end of our time, but before we close, what are the key takeaways for members of our audience?
Yeah, so I guess as the whole theme of today's session has been about a focus on profitability, then we really see these as like the three most important strategies to be mindful of as we approach 2025 and beyond. So yeah, ultimately, having that ability to offer usage-based options, giving your customers more flexibility, the need to monitor compliance to prevent revenue leakage, and centralizing your hybrid strategies for that total visibility throughout the customer lifecycle. Ultimately, these all help with growing revenue, monitoring risk, and streamlining your operations. If you're looking to grow profitability, then there are three core factors that you need to.
Yeah, and just one other thing I would add, Chris, is obviously when you sell solutions to software vendors, to technology companies that are very adept in writing their own software, there is this urge, temptation, interest in just doing it yourself, right? We have engineers, they can write code, they're really solid at this. But I think as we've discussed today, when the real focus is on accelerating time to value and unlocking new revenue opportunities, you've got to move fast. And it's really important to make sure you have the right solutions in place that help you do that. You mentioned the ability to give your end customers a single user experience across your product portfolio. Our recommendation is always for software vendors to focus on their roadmap, deliver the value that their customers are asking for. And when it comes to software monetization, partner with somebody like Revenera to make sure that you can manage that complexity at scale, as you touched on before. And I think we do have some resources for folks that want to connect or explore or learn more. There's great blog posts that Chris put together on how to sell software with pay-as-you-go pricing that has some great insights into how to do that. As I just touched on, the build versus buy debate. And then I recommend that everybody please take a look at the Monetization Monitor reports. We have a link here to the first one, Software Monetization Models and Strategies 2025 Outlook. But as I mentioned, we also have one on software piracy and software usage analytics. So hopefully that was helpful. It gave you some great insights to kick off the coming year in a profitable and successful way.
Well, that certainly is great information, Michael and Chris. Thank you. Well, that is all the time we have in this video webcast. Sincere thanks to our two experts, Michael Goff, Principal Product Marketing at Revenera, and Chris Cahill, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Revenera. Thanks to both for telling us about the new monetization models that are emerging, their advantages and disadvantages, and how you might go about putting them to work for your company. For more information on this topic, please do take a look at the resources area on your webcast player, where you'll find links and documents of interest. And thanks for joining us. For Revenera and CIO, I'm Stan Gibson.